Hello and welcome to episode 602 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always joined by Evan Silva, and today we have a very, very special guest. You all know how much Evan and I respect the NFL beat writers. They're a massive, massive part of what we do, and the good ones, I emphasize the good ones, are extremely valuable. And today we have one of the best. It is, in my opinion, the top dog on the Philadelphia Eagles beat, Jimmy Kempski of phillyvoice.com. Jimmy, thanks for doing the show. How's it going today?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hello, by the way. Before we even get to Eagle stuff, I would like to say that I've never been prouder of friends of mine in this business than when Jimmy Kimmel did the unnecessary censorship. And it's funny because the first time I saw that, I didn't know that it was a bit. Like I saw it like the first, I missed like the first 10, 15 seconds of it. So I didn't see Jimmy Kimmel introduce it. I just saw you guys talking and then like there's bleeps and bleeps. And I was like, wow. Like, I was like, wow, they use a lot of language. And I don't recall that I listened to your podcast and I didn't like recall you guys using a ton of language, but at the same time, like it didn't seem that much of a stretch, like what you guys were saying. And then I realized quickly, like, no, there's got to be something going on here. And then I realized it was Jimmy Kimmel, but it's so funny. And I was like crying, laughing throughout that once I realized that it was a Jimmy Kimmel bit. It was awesome that you guys had that on there.
So many people think that was real, that Jimmy Kimmel actually, I mean,
that's great.
Imagine thinking that Jimmy Kimmel took like 2 minutes out of his show that millions and millions of people watch to talk about us. Anyways,
Evan, I sent it to like everybody in my phone, and like 60% of people thought it was real, and I haven't even told him yet that it's fake. Like they think to this day that like we were on Jimmy Kimmel.
That's awesome.
All right, we wanted to have Mr. Kempski on today because things have gotten completely out of control on Eagles stuff, specifically Eagles running back stuff, and we actually think that this is one of the most important parts of fantasy this season. I mean, we know the Eagles are going to be very efficient running the football. We're just not exactly sure who and how. And I'd also note that the Eagles play the Cardinals in week 17, which I expect to be one of the best matchups this year. That's fantasy championship week, of course. So we're going to talk to Jimmy today about all things Eagles, especially running back. Before we get into it, wanted to remind everyone, the reason we're doing this show is the same reason we do anything else. We think it's something you actually need to know to help you win. We're not going to waste your time with anything else. If you like this approach, we really encourage you to check out our draft kit. Covers everything you need for season-long fantasy football, rankings that update daily, late round target list, tons more. Check it out, EstablishTheRun.com/subscribe. All right, Jimmy, let's get right into it here with the running backs. We have our own assumptions about how the running back situation will play out here. Evan has his own take. I have my own take. We are not with the team every single day. I give the floor to you, Jimmy. How do you see Eagles running back playing out this year?
Well, specifically, I guess there were recent reports that Kenneth Gainwell was getting like a ton of reps, first team reps in the offense. Just to give that proper context, there were a couple practices in a row where the Eagles were running their 2-minute offense. That was his role last year. He was the 2-minute guy and the third down guy. And Miles Sanders was sort of the early down guy. Boston Scott was his immediate backup. Like he basically just took Sanders' roles when Sanders got tired or was hurt. And then Trey Sermon was inactive for almost every game. He got like 2 carries in the season last year. So yeah, Kenny Gainwell got a ton of reps with the first team that, those couple of days. But it's because they were doing situations in practice that was specific to his role. So of course he did. So I think maybe there was a little bit of a runaway train effect going on there with I think a little too much was being made of the number of reps that he was getting during practice, those couple of practices. But for my money, the most talented back on the roster is, and I don't think it's that close, it's DeAndre Swift. Mm-hmm. It's just, can he stay healthy? Can he you look at the first couple games of the Detroit Lions season last year, they played the Eagles week 1. So I remember that very close recollection of that game. He killed the Eagles in that game. Week 2, I think they played Washington and he made like a huge play on a reception. He caught a ball, went down, popped right back up, made a couple guys miss, had a nice run for a touchdown. dinged up his ankle week 3, I think it was. And then or it was either week 3 or week 4. And then that kind of slowed his season from there. Wasn't totally right. Got a little better as the season went along. And by the end of the year, like he was playing well again. But he's the most talented back on the roster. And I don't think, again, like I said, I don't think it's close. I think Rashaad Penny is super talented, but obviously the injury concerns there are a lot, are even heightened further than they are with DeAndre Swift. Kenny Gainwell's a nice player. Like, I think his role has sort of grown from his first year in the league in 2021 to a second year in the league in 2022. He was primarily just a 2-minute and third down guy last year. I think he probably will get some more action on first and second down this year, but it's not going to be so substantial that, you're taking this guy, early in your fantasy draft or anything like that. Any Eagles running back that you take, or the one guy that I would say, like, I don't know. I just don't understand where the hype is coming from in any way whatsoever is Trey Sermon. Like, I just haven't seen that much from him in practice. And we're talking about a guy, again, last year, the 49ers cut him at 53-man cutdowns. The Eagles at that time were 19th in the waiver order. So 18 teams that weren't that good passed on him. Mm-hmm. He gets 2 carries, the following season. If the Eagles were to cut him again, like if the Eagles were to cut him, at 53-man cutdowns, then it'll be the second year in a row that his team cut him at 53-man cutdowns. Who, like, has his stock risen so much from the year before that some team's going to claim him? So I think there's I would call it sort of a long shot that he makes the team even. I think it'll be, Kenny Gainwell, DeAndre Swift, Rashaad Penny, and then Boston Scott. They just like him and they know him. He's been there for 5-6 years now. I think they're the 4 guys. If you're drafting Trey Sermon, I mean, don't take another guy on another team.
So I think the question is, I think we'd all agree with you. DeAndre Swift's the most talented. The Detroit Lions did not think DeAndre Swift was a good runner between the tackles, period. The Lions didn't even think DeAndre Swift was that good, period. They gave him up to the Eagles for effectively a pick swap. Do you think DeAndre Swift will play base downs first and second? Because my assumption is that Rashaad Penny is actually the better between the tackles. And if they earn a 1st and 10 from their own 20, it's Rashaad Penny that is likeliest to be the running back in that situation.
It's funny because Rashaad Penny just spoke with us a few days ago, or a little while ago, and he's always been listed at 225. And he revealed he's playing in Seattle at 237, and he's actually going to, he's working toward being a little closer to 230. So he's actually played a little heavier than I think people sort of knew over the last few years. And yeah, it's certainly like that's his game. He's a power back. He's also got speed. So when he gets into the open field, he can run away from defensive backs, kind of like a poor man's, Derrick Henry, in my opinion, just with the injury concerns on top of it. But I actually was surprised when I cut up all of DeAndre Swift's carries and targets last year with the Lions. And I came away kind of surprised with what he is as a runner. I actually think he can run through the tackle, like between the tackles. If there's a hole, he doesn't hesitate. He'll hit it, but he's not going to break a lot of tackles. So if he runs head on into a linebacker, he's not one of these guys that's going to fall forward even. He's probably not going to break the tackle. He's either going to go straight down or he's going to get pushed back. So yeah, he's not going to be like a short yardage guy or anything like that, but I think he is sort of a home run threat, and he can run outside. He can run inside. Like I said, he's not a guy that will dance around in the backfield and look to kind of break everything to the outside. If there's a hole between the tackles, he will hit it. It's just he's not a big tackle breaker. And when he gets on the edge, he can be elusive and make guys miss, which isn't quite the same as breaking tackles, but similar enough. So I actually came away from that exercise a little more encouraged by what he can do between the tackles than what my original perception of him was.
There's been some negative kind of rhetoric around Rashaad Penny. He played a ton in the preseason game, maybe more than people were expecting. In practice, have you noticed Penny or Swift getting more first team reps in base or anything like that? Because I'm not sure that preseason game is necessarily an indicator of how it's going to go in the regular season.
Yeah, he got 9 carries, which, for a guy that's hurt a lot, it's kind of counterintuitive to give that guy that kind of number of carries in a meaningless game, when you might need him during the regular season. But so he's been a guy that throughout camp, those guys are the bigger backs that break a lot of tackles and are power backs. They're a little harder to evaluate. Like we had Jordan Howard. The Eagles had Jordan Howard here for a number of years. He was impossible to evaluate during training because he's slow. And they're just playing two-hand touch in practice. So you can't really get a good evaluation of those guys until they're actually, tackling to the ground or whatever. And you don't really get a good look at them, at those kind of guys really until the regular season begins. So he's been tough to evaluate. It did surprise me that he got as many carries as he did. I think that I think I would sort of project DeAndre Swift to have significantly more touches than him from the outset of the season. Now, whether that changes as the season goes along is another story, but the Eagles just had joint practices the last 2 days, today and the day before, with the Cleveland Browns. And the guy that was getting like the most first team reps, I think, just sort of, I didn't take notes on the number of first team reps that each guy got, but just my general observation would be that it was probably DeAndre Swift that got the most reps in these joint practices and scrimmages or whatever. And he's looked good. Like, he's looked really elusive. I think he's healthy right now. Again, can he sustain that over time? But as far as the Rashaad Penny, discussion goes, he is a monster. Like, whenever he rattles off like these, he has these streaky stretches. Last year he had one at the beginning of the year before he got hurt and was done for the season. At the end of the 2021 season, he totally went off. The Seahawks season at that point was, nobody was paying attention to them at that point in the season, but he went off at the end of 2021. So he certainly has that in him. And it's like, it's a really difficult group of backs to get a handle on their playing time, because they all do sort of have more pretty defined skill sets, and aren't none of them are really 3-down backs the way that you traditionally think of them. So that's what makes it so difficult. And you said at the outset, they have such potential in the Eagles offense. That offensive line, it's like the best offensive line in the NFL. And you can't pack the box because you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside. You have Dallas Goedert at tight end, and you have speed in the slot and Quez Watkins. So it's, pick your poison. And if you don't pack the box, they can. And by the way, Jalen Hurts takes a lot of attention away from running backs too, because he's a running threat as well. So it's an offense where if they did have a 3-down back, we're talking about the guy that probably goes 1-1 overall, but they just don't have that, and it's kind of a weird setup.
Exactly. Rashaad Penny coming out of college was like a speed score freak. This dude used to return kicks for touchdowns in college. I mean, he is freaky. First of all, I just want to give you thanks so much for doing this, Jimmy.
Yeah, man.
But
love you guys,
dude. Your coverage is just sick. I mean, the level of depth that you go into, and Levitan called you the main dude on the top dog on the Eagles beat. That's a hyper competitive beat. I mean, how many beat writers do they have? Freaking
it's too many. It's
by far the biggest media contingent in the NFL. I think people would think maybe one of the New York teams or Chicago or Dallas or something like that. But when we go on the road, there's a ton of people. There's tons of people that cover the team just day to day, whether it's beat writers, TV people, radio people. I mean, there's dozens that are there at practice every day. On the road, there's probably 15 of us that travel with the team, and that's a huge number. Normally, if Atlanta comes and plays or Jacksonville comes and plays in Philly or whatever, not to besmirch either of those cities or teams or anything like that. But there are 3 or 4 guys that are traveling with the team. But in Philly, there's a big media contingent that goes on the road.
And you're the only one that I consistently read every word that you write.
Oh, thanks, man.
No, you're absolutely the man. I was going to say, I don't necessarily think it was that the Lions coaches thought that DeAndre Swift couldn't run between the tackles. I think that the Lions coaches didn't believe that DeAndre Swift could hold up physically to a big workload. That I don't want to call the guy soft, all right? He could probably beat my ass. But I mean, I think that they just thought that, he'd have to check out a lot, or he'd, run out of bounds at the end of a run, or and I think that they got frustrated with him about that. And so is that same thinking going to, are the Eagles coaches going to think the same thing about him, that he can't hold up to a significant workload? And also, the Eagles don't throw the ball to running backs very much, and that's his game. Now, I've read that he's been featured in the passing game when they do throw the ball to running backs, and He looks great. I mean, you've written about it. But at the end of the day, if he's not getting a lot of carries and the Eagles don't throw to running backs, how many touches is this dude going to get? And there's this feeling among coaches that he can't hold up to a lot of touches.
So on the point where they actually threw to the running backs less than any other team in the NFL last season, and for good reason. Like Miles Sanders was not a quality pass catcher. Like he had like that was a concern of his coming out of Penn State, and he actually had a good rookie season as a receiver. But then the 3 years thereafter, terrible. Like drops galore, just not in the right place a lot of times as a receiver. Just couldn't get on the same page with whether it was Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts or whatever. It just never really blossomed into a guy that was reliable as a pass catcher. So there's that. And then, of course, last year they have A.J. Brown, they have Devontae Smith, they have Dallas Goedert. It'd be crazy not to have those three guys dominate the target share. So, I understand that they didn't throw a lot to the running backs. I think maybe that changes when they have a guy back there that changes to some degree when they have a guy back there capable of catching passes out of the backfield. And also, like, the Eagles are set up to be a great screen team because their offensive line is just insanely athletic. Like Jason Kelsey is arguably the most athletic center ever. Cam Jurgens is a center playing right guard, and he's got extreme athleticism for a right guard. Lane Johnson, and you look at go to mockdraftable.com, you type in Lane Johnson, look at his spider chart on there. It's insane. One of the best combine performances ever. Extremely athletic, right tackle. And then on the left side, you have Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson, who are certainly, they're more road graders, but they're certainly capable of getting out on the edge too. So there's no reason why they shouldn't have a great screen team, especially because opposing defenses have to respect A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith down the field. You send those guys, deep down the field, and you can open up sort of underneath in the screen game. They just weren't able to do it a year ago. I think you're going to see a lot more of that this year. I don't think they're going to be one of these teams that throws a ton to their running backs, but it'll certainly be more than they did in the past. I think you can still count on DeAndre Swift getting, a decent number of targets his way, 4 or 5 per game, maybe. In practices so far, they've used them a lot on those angle routes, the Texas routes where, go toward the sideline, you cut back in. That seems to be a staple of theirs so far throughout camp. And then on wheel routes, you might get some. You had an amazing catch on a wheel route. Got interfered with. Was going to the ground, still caught the ball as it was coming down. It was probably the play of camp so far that he made on a wheel route. So they're going to feature him a lot more than they did Miles Sanders in the passing game. But it's they're never going to be a team that is when you have A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith, you're just not going to be in the top half of the league in terms of targets to running backs.
Sure. And rushing quarterbacks historically have a much lower throw rate at running backs. I just a couple more quick ones. I want to move on from this running back stuff, but 2 quick questions on running back. It's 3rd and 8. We know Kenny Gainwell is good in the pass game. We know DeAndre Swift is in the pass game. Mm-hmm. Do you have a lean on who the Eagles at the start of the season would lean to in a 3rd and 8 situation this time?
I think it's Gainwell, at least early in the season. I think it's Kenny Gainwell because there's familiarity. He's been in the system for 2 years, and I think they trust that he knows more than anything. I think they like guys they can trust that they know where they have to be. And at this point, Kenny Gainwell has the upper hand because he's been with the team for 2 years, whereas Rashaad Penny's new, DeAndre Swift is new. Boston Scott knew not really much of a threat as a receiver. So I think it's him in that situation, at least early on. If DeAndre Swift is just absolutely killing it and you don't want to take him off the field as little as possible, then it could be him later in the season. But to start off, it'll be Kenny Gainwell in those situations.
Is the Boston Scott against the Giants thing a real thing?
Yeah. I mean, for whatever reason, it seems like Miles Sanders has gotten hurt, either during Giants games or in advance of them. And Boston Scott has absolutely gone off about that team, about as reliable. And then he does nothing against anybody else. Yeah. Giants fans that have to absolutely hate that guy.
Okay. My second question was it's 2nd and goal from the 1 in week 1. I think their default is most likely to run the tush push again. You can correct me there if I'm wrong.
For sure.
Do you think they'll go tush push in that spot again? And if they don't go tush push, who do you think gets the carry 2nd and goal from the 1?
So 2nd and goal from the 1, you might have Rashaad Penny in there. third and fourth, and they're not screwing around on third and fourth. They're going to do the sneak. Like if they might not do a sneak on second just to preserve Jalen Hurts from potential pain.
Mm-hmm.
But that their QB sneak arsenal. I mean, teams tried to get it outlawed because it was so successful. So that should tell you like how much they trust that play and how effective it is.
But you think if they give it to a running back, you think right now would likely be Penny?
Yeah, Penny at the goal line, I believe. Yeah.
All right.
I've read that Dallas Goedert is killing it in camp. Now, Dallas Goedert, obviously, he's shared time for most of his career up until really last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he's never scored more than 4 touchdowns in a season. I feel like at some point he's just going to pop off for like 9 or 11 or something like that. But I know you've been writing about how awesome Dallas Goedert has looked in camp.
Uncoverable.
And Jalen Hurts.
Hurts has tailed off a tiny bit.
Okay.
He came out hot. He's had a great camp. He's had by far the best camp that he's had of his career. So like I think the bar is a little higher for him in terms of what our expectations, especially at the year that he just had when he was MVP runner up. But as far as Goddard goes, uncoverable. And some of that might be that the Eagles linebackers are shaky, to put it kindly. They can't cover him. And then the safeties, I think, is another area that it's a perceived sort of weakness of the Eagles roster. They haven't been able to cover him either. He's been just destroying every day in camp. And I, tangentially, I just try to pay attention to the rest of the NFC East. And I see like Darren Waller, for example, just getting tons of hype. Can't cover him, and I'm sure he's killing it in Giants camp. But I think you don't hear as much of that with Goddard for 2 reasons. One, in Giants camp, they don't have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, also making plays every day that are really impressive. And then also Darren Waller's new. So we've seen Dallas Goedert for the past 4 or 5 years. We already know he's good. I think personally he's taken his game as a receiver anyway to another level so far in this camp. Like last year, I was certain he was gonna, get like 1,000 yards receiving, and he was on pace to do it. And he got hurt right around. It was in the Washington game, the first loss, which was week 10, and then he missed like 5 or 6 games, and that didn't happen. He still, caught like over 700 passing yards. I'd be shocked if he plays 17 games and doesn't reach 1,000 yards this season. I'd be absolutely stunned. And, Evan, I think you had pointed out that, he's never had more than 4 receiving touchdowns in a season in his career. And it's weird that he hasn't, really produced much in the way of touchdowns, because he's a big target and he makes a lot of sense for them to go his way when they get into the red zone. We talked about the tush push a minute ago. I think they like to run the ball when they get in close, in particular with Jalen Hurts had, insane number of rushing touchdowns, not even just with the tush push or whatever, but just otherwise. Miles Sanders had 11 touchdowns last year, I think it was. So yeah, they like to run the ball when they get down in the red zone, which maybe hurts the red zone production of both the receivers and the tight end. But at some point he's going to pop. And if you have him on your roster, he's like the kind of guy that if he does pop, you're getting major production from a guy that you can probably get a lot later in the draft. Can win you a fantasy league, in my opinion.
We actually took Jalen Hurts over 600.5 receiving yards. That we took that way back on June 15th. That line is gone now. But yeah, I'd love to hear it on Dallas Goedert.
Wait, what was the line?
Wait. You said Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We took Dallas Goedert over
600?
600.5 receiving
That
yards.
Is insanely low.
Yes.
That is a no-brainer over.
I'm not sure you're aware, Jimmy, but there are a lot of injuries in the NFL, and so before we put it in the bank account, let's take it easy for a second.
I'm going on the DraftKings app right now.
Bet your mortgage.
The line is gone. Don't worry, Evan. The last thing before we get you out of here, if something were to happen to AJ Brown or Devonta Smith, last year we knew it would be Quez Watkins. This year, I think there's a competition going on between Olamide Zaccheaus and Quez Watkins for that number 3 wide receiver role. We don't spend a lot of time on this. I'm just curious who you think is ahead there in Olamide versus Quez.
All right. So first of all, it took me a while to learn it too, but I'm gonna teach you his pronunciation.
Oh, perfect.
So it's llama, like the animal, day. It's like, it's llama day. So
wow, I have never heard it said like that before.
It's Olamide Zaccheaus.
Okay.
But yeah, I think entering camp there was reason to believe there was a battle for the starting slot receiver job between Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus. And what Watkins brings to the table is he's one of the fastest players on the team. He might be. They have Devin Allen, who's like an Olympic hurdler, so he's probably the fastest guy. But beyond him, and he's probably not going to make the team. But yeah, beyond him, you have Quez Watkins, and he's the fastest guy thereafter. So he gives the element of stretching the field. I don't know why opposing defenses would respect that, given that he hasn't made the plays last year anyway, he didn't make the plays that came his way. He's more potential right now than he is production. So he can break out at any minute, but it just has, and he's had good camps. He's had a good camp so far this year, had a good camp last year, but it just didn't translate to the games. Zaccheaus was more of a reliable receiver. He's their number 2 in Atlanta last year, receiver anyway, behind Drake London. I guess it was Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and then he was their third guy, their third option in the passing game, that is. But he was really technically the number 2 receiver. He was also sort of a downfield threat, doesn't have the same kind of speed that Watkins does, but Atlanta used them in a similar way as the Eagles use Watkins. So it's kind of a similar, like almost kind of apples to apples, kind of close enough to apples kind of comparison between those two guys in camp. I would say that Watkins so far has had a better camp than Zaccheaus. Zaccheaus has the disadvantage of playing with Marcus Mariota on the second team. Mariota can run, he can do some nice things, he can make plays here and there. He cannot throw accurately in the intermediate or deeper parts of the field to save his life. So that hurts Zaccheaus for sure. But I would say that, Watkins has, pretty consistently gotten the number 1.
Right.
He's been consistently with the ones during practice. He's going to be their starting slot receiver. If AJ Brown or Devontae Smith go down, Quez Watkins is their primary backup on the outside. So he would play on the outside, and then Zaccheaus would come in and he would start in the slot. Otherwise, they don't really have another guy that's like obviously going to make the team that can play on the outside. It's Quez Watkins is the third guy. So they are kind of thin at outside receiver. Obviously, they have, between them, Bengals, Dolphins, Bengals, Dolphins are, take your pick in terms of who have the best 1-2 combination at receiver in the league. But they don't have a lot of guys behind them, and Quez would be the first guy up first guy on the outside thereafter.
Okay, perfect. I think we have covered it all on the Eagles front for stuff that we actually care about here in the fantasy space. This is amazing information, Jimmy. Thanks so much. Tell the people where they can find you, anywhere on social or anywhere they can find your work.
Yeah, at Jimmy Kempski, and I write for Philly Voice. And by the way, Evan Silva has pretty much run my fantasy football drafts for like the last 10 years. I go in completely unprepared. I just print out his list, and I'll veer from it here and there. There's some players I might disagree with on a smaller level, but he's what I work off of after doing no prep whatsoever.
And that's how you've won 10 consecutive fantasy football leagues.
Exactly. That's right.
All right. Be sure you're following Jimmy at Jimmy Kempski on the Twitter machine. Myself and Evan, Adam Levitan, Evan Silva, all one word. Ton more pods coming this week. Silva rankings, changes, auction, draft, strategy, Evan and I's least favorite pick in each round, tons more. Be sure to subscribe anywhere podcasts are found. For Jimmy, for Evan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.